Hello, and welcome to the third video in the series dealing with the vast topic of natural resources. Now, our natural resources mean everything to us. They keep us alive, they connect us, and they even divide us. They're the air we breathe, the food we eat, and the water we drink, no matter what flavour we add. And they're everywhere in the places we live. They provide us with the tools we use to survive, to thrive, and even to entertain ourselves. They're a major contributor to almost everything we do. From brushing our teeth to eating breakfast, from driving our cars to powering our phones, computers and coffee makers. Yet every day, our use of natural resources goes almost unnoticed, almost underappreciated and probably undervalued. If we look at the word resources in a dictionary, we find words like supply, needs, wealth, money, and phrases like property that can be converted into money and assets. But we're slowly realising that our natural resources can no longer be used simply as we see fit. In our thirst for resources, we've poorly considered the nature of their availability, or even their renewability, or the consequences of their extraction, as if they were supplies from an assembly line stuck on a continuous loop. So how do we get this way, particularly here in Canada, where we're fortunate to be very rich in resources? When explorers like John Cabot first glimpsed the shores of the New World, they likely saw an apparently endless supply of riches. Initially, in the forests and the fish in the waters off the coast of Newfoundland. The New World was like many other parts of the world, places to explore and exploit, to take back the rare and valuable to the home countries, to pay the bills for the voyage, and to raise interest in new adventures. History tells many tales of such discovery and exploitation. For silk and spices, animal hides and ivory, gold and silver, potatoes and lots of exotic plants, even tobacco. The world was an apparent infinite treasure trove for the rich seagoing nations of the world. And that led to waves of resource-driven colonization in so many parts of the world. The difference now is that we no longer see the need to colonize as corporations go and seek out the resources to help make us comfortable. The notion of resources and their value to us has become extremely compelling over time, with a perpetual increase in their wide application. Interestingly, when the economy has a downturn, the world puts its monetary resources into the hands of gold, a wonderful material that is corrosion resistant, malleable, castable, and very dense. But are these the attributes that can help us cope with economic difficulties? Not really. In reality, everything has a value because we think it is valuable and for no other reason. Often this value is based on utility, but often it's more ephemeral. But we are driven to seek out and exploit new sources of resources based on their physical properties and, as a consequence, their economic benefits. And we've done this throughout civilization. It's thought that the people who lived on Easter Island died off because of their over-exploitation of their forests, and hence all the growth on the island, a bit like Dr. Seuss's Lorax. Now, it's obvious that we don't want to go down the same path and suffer the same fate, but we're economically driven to find new sources of resources and exploit them. At the beginning of the 20th century, it's fascinating that many of the major cities in the world were concerned that they would be overrun by the piles of horse manure accumulating at the sides of their streets. At the same time, we found out how to make gasoline from oil and created automobiles that used that gasoline. And we no longer needed horses. We were saved from the threat of horse manure and have enjoyed the benefits of horseless carriages for more than 100 years. Along the way, we've evolved highly energy consumptive lifestyles, making full use of an array of natural resources that we have collectively become more and more dependent on. And this is where a parallel can be drawn between our resource use and addiction. Like any addiction, the more of something that is used, the more it is relied upon. We start to need more and more to feed a vicious cycle, which in turn becomes more detrimental and costly. In a sense, our tolerance for the substance increases, and we respond accordingly by increasing our intake. Like an addiction, we think primarily of the present and not of our survival and vitality. Consider this hierarchy derived from the work of Abraham Maslow. Within reason, actions that involve some basic resource utilization tend to have little detrimental effect. But when it becomes impulsive and relied upon, it becomes an addiction. It transitions from a basic need to an occasional luxury, which leads towards decadence. Eventually, this need compels us to use more and more, almost predictably, and our habit becomes dangerous and even destructive. Perhaps this is something of an exaggeration, but in the last 20 or 30 years, we've started to change our attitudes. Well, some have. And we've come up with new words and phrases to encourage healthier, less addictive and consumptive lifestyles. Words like sustainability have come into existence, and many corporations now commonly use these words in marketing campaigns to encourage us to see them as responsible and environmentally conscious organizations. But the University of Michigan professor Stephen Kirsch believes that the concept of sustainability has become lost over time. In his description of sustainability, Kirsch believes that corporate oxymorons completely deviate from the initial meaning or intent. Words such as sustainable mining and clean coal have been widely distributed, and their meanings are in many ways contradictory. Mining of resources is a very taxing action, and it's consistently rated as the leading source of toxic pollution in the United States. That's by the Environmental Protection Agency. More recently, runoff from tailings ponds resulting from oil sands mining has been polluting the Athabasca River in Alberta. So whether corporations are being honest or not is a real concern. But let's not forget that the fact that they feel the need to be seen to be acting sustainably is a step in the right direction. So we have this complex conundrum. We use resources and raw materials to create tools and machinery to extract more resources and to reach new areas that were previously unattainable. Of course, these tools and machines are constantly becoming bigger and bigger as we look to maximize our extraction outputs. Some believe that we're essentially becoming more efficient at polluting and corrupting ourselves and our homes. And all these concerns exemplify the imperfections that have arisen in our attempts to minimize our impact when extracting and using resources. Sustainability has become synonymous with finding cleaner and more conscious ways of maintaining our current lifestyles, no matter how comfortable or decadent that lifestyle is. We could think of our material extraction habits in the same way we act in spending money. Could that be because of the popularization of credit and a buy now, pay later attitude? By creating a false sense of wealth and income, we've effectively inflated our sense of buying and consuming power and lost the true meaning of value and the true cost of things. Today, if you wanted to buy an air ticket to anywhere in the world and you didn't have the money but had a credit card, there's nothing that would stop you from doing it. We do whatever we want without having a true sense of what the real costs are when we rely purely on credit. We can buy the ticket, make the trip, without ever having to save up for it. That's until we get the bill. Same goes for extracting and using a resource such as coal or oil. We mine it in the same way that we purchase things with credit. Buy and use now and pay later. But eventually that grace period runs out and we have to deal with the consequences. And for resources, some of those consequences are only recently coming to light. And perhaps we won't have the so-called benefits of inventing cars to save us from the horse manure. Simply pointing out the shortcomings of our resource habits may help us increase our awareness of the consequences. But the aim of these videos is to help provide some better perspective. Today, increasing numbers of people are aware that resource extraction through processes associated with mining and more recently fracking can have negative long-term side effects. That in itself is useful, but must also make long-term plans if we're going to use such valuable resources wisely. In the past 30 or 40 years, we've started to think about one of our precious resources a little differently. Those forests that were first attractive to the early explorers are no longer seen as a collection of trees to be cut down and cut up when ready. The Canadian Model Forest Network, or CMFN, has 15 model forests in Canada, which they use to showcase collaborations between various parties with differing interests. By using best practices, the CMFN ensures that there is more a democratic approach to decision making regarding this resource. A forest is not simply just a supply of timber, say for more IKEA furniture or housing. It's also part of the albedo. It's a habitat for animals and plants, a way to neutralize carbon dioxide and create oxygen, a protection for soils, and a supplier of its own nutrients, and also a way of offering surplus materials to help build our furniture and houses. The CMFN also emphasises the importance of promoting local economic growth without compromising the environment and biodiversity. It also believes that these forest management practices can be applied to many other natural resources. By reducing our use and consumption habits of resources, like our forests, we're starting to make positive strides. We're learning what it takes to use resources sustainably and dealing with new terms like carrying capacity, how much we can afford to use, and how we should go about it. So we have some good examples to build on, and just as we are learning to manage our forests, we're also learning that if we want to make something out of wood, then it should last at least as long as it took the tree to grow the wood in the first place. But forests are not the only resource we can learn from. Interestingly, we've enjoyed the benefits of many of our everyday metals for many, many years. Gold, steel, copper, aluminum, but a few. We know how to melt them down and even recycle them. But it took quite a while to work that out. In contrast, most of our plastics, which are derived from oil, have only been around for less than 100 years. We've only started to recycle them in the last 20 years or so. It seems funny to say that we are still very naive in our understanding of the true way to use oil and plastics. Oil is such a fantastic molecule that we shouldn't really burn it. The many polymers and plastics that we've helped to create from oil actually offer a good degree of recyclability. That'll be when we learn how to use them correctly. Here in Ontario, we're starting to adopt widespread codes for recycling. Just as we know how to recycle aluminum, driven by the excessive costs of producing new stuff from bauxite in the first place, we're starting to learn what materials we should be making things out of in the first place. We're starting to talk about cradle-to-cradle thinking rather than cradle-to-grave. And hopefully, we're learning how to take advantage of the renewable and non-renewable resources we've inherited on this planet, without damaging the geography, geology, and habitat that helped put it there in the first place. At a local and personal level, there are many things that we can do to reduce resource dependence and taper off our addiction. Just look at this university's own ban on the sale of bottled water, which in itself has been a success. Or buying clothes or household products second-hand. Actions like taking the bus instead of driving. And services like usage-based car insurance, which has become popular in Europe and is even becoming to be adopted in Canada. All these examples help to reduce our dependence on our oil resources. These are small victories, and they contribute to a brighter outlook on our future. But in order to change, we have to realize the precarious nature of our addictive relationship with resources. This dependence is understandable. We rely on our natural resources for employment, wealth creation, economic stimulation, and they also provide us with the materials required in processing and manufacturing products. This is what makes it difficult to divert from our current path. But the longer we continue, the worse off we will be. Collectively, we have to broker a transition to renewability in our lifestyles and find the elusive balance that will ensure future prosperity through conscious consumption and actions which enhance our understanding. Then we can begin a transition to an era of respect for our wonderful natural resources. See you next time when we'll look a little more at the challenges of pollution.